to the Hublife Podcast. We are here today having conversations all about ending the need of food banks here in the UK. And we are very lucky today because here with us, we have Mark Snowdon, who is, I'm going to get this correct, ready? Executive Projects Manager at Breckland County Council. Is that right?
Breckland District
Council. Oh,
District
so close,
Council.
so close.
But we are going to leave that
That's
in.
good, cool, because I did that first time.
So close.
Welcome, Mark. We're glad
Thank you.
you're
Thank
here.
you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. And I know you from the past a bit, and I know your brothers, and you're a Thetford boy. So why don't you introduce who you are?
I am a Thetford boy indeed, yeah. So I grew up in Thetford. I went to Norwich Road Primary School and then on to Charlesborough High School.
Best high school in
What a
Thetford.
shame.
absolutely,
What a shame.
yeah,
I thought
absolutely.
we could get along, Mark. No.
I knew he was going to react in that way. But isn't it funny how after all of these years, obviously Charlesborough High School's long gone, Rosary Muscat is long gone, but that rivalry is still there,
always
isn't it? And I
remain.
don't think that rival will ever go away, will it?
No, it remains in our marriage.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, same here as well. So in our household, my wife went to Rosary Muscat. We're the same year group as well. And yeah, that rivalry is still there. It will never go, will it?
You see how you assume we weren't the same year group because I look so much older than you. That's what it is. But
And
carry
you
on.
probably
We'll
have
take
the
that.
same conversations we have where it's, our football team was better than yours at Rosary Muscat. And we say, well, we had a swimming pool, beat that.
Yeah,
You can't beat that.
yeah. Fair enough. We can't beat that.
Grew up in Thetford, always been involved something locally in Thetford, whether that's football, whether that's sport, on through my career as well. And that sort of connection to Thetford goes back several generations in my family as well, all the way back to my great-grandfather and his three brothers. They worked for Charlesborough and Sons.
Oh, really?
So they worked, in the
Oh,
paint
I
shop
didn't
and the
know that.
workshop. Yeah, they did.
Well, because obviously you were at Charlesborough Centre.
Yeah,
so-
that connection as well, yeah. So they all four of them got called up to World War One, and my great-granddad, Arthur Mewton, was the only one of the four brothers that actually came back from World War One. His three brothers were killed out there, and whilst he was serving out there as well, his parents died of Spanish flu, and he had to come back because he had a younger sister, and he was obviously the only one of the brothers that survived. So just an incredible story. It's attracted a lot of sort of local attention and national attention from a historical point of view. Obviously a massive sacrifice and really sort of important backstory in terms of my family as well. And my family spent a long time searching for those war medals because they were lost years later when his younger sister moved home. So yeah, always grown up in Thetford, and my great-grandfather, his daughter, Dorothy Knights, was part of the Salvation Army in Thetford in Magdalen Street for 95 years. So she joined the Sunday school.
Nora.
Yeah, she joined the Sunday school at age 4 and carried on serving all the way up to age 99 when she passed away, just shy of her 100th birthday. So 95 years with the Salvation Army in Thetford, and I can't even begin to sort of imagine, let alone quantify, how many people she helped during that time through her work at the Salvation Army, and just always had those really sort of simple core values of just helping people that need help. And that's something that's stuck with me for a long time, and always looked up to her as a really important role model in my life. And I think that's kind of carried on through the generations of my family as well. My mum was a nursery teacher in most of her career. Was spent at Redcastle Firs primary school. She spent over 20 years there. So
Oh, really?
growing
we used
up,
to be in Redcastle.
Really,
But,
yeah.
Like the Liberty Christian Family Centre who run the food bank.
Yeah.
Ran out of there for a little while as well.
yeah. So
These little connections.
yeah, so growing up, everyone knew my mum and my nan, and everywhere I go, everyone would stop us and talk to my mum and my nan. They still do now.
Yeah.
So at the weekend, we took the kids up to Centre Parks, and the guy who served us there in the coffee shop recognised my mum's his nursery teacher. So he stopped and had a conversation. He got his colleagues and introduced his colleagues and said, "Oh, this is my nursery teacher, Mrs. Snowdon." Yeah, and that's stuck with me everywhere. Everyone always knows my mum or my nan. It has its downsides because every time we would
Everyone knows
go
your
out,
mum and your nan.
I know, but we'd go out, and if we got in trouble and done anything we shouldn't have done, my mum would know about it before we even got home. So yeah, that had its downsides, but the upside of that is I've always felt that connection to the community in Thetford, and been really lucky in terms of my career to play a part in some really important projects locally, and that's sort of led me down a career path into local government.
Yeah, so before that you were essentially CEO or head honcho or big cheese, I don't know what the formal title was, at the Charlesborough Centre, and done a lot of great work there as well, and then moved on into the Breckland District Council, doing what you do now. So could you give a quick general overview of what your role entails as the Executive Projects Manager at the council, and and your role on your team, or the role of your team and the role of you on your team.
Yeah. So it's a really posh job title, I think, and still one that I'm getting used to because I've only had it a couple of months now. But in a nutshell, what that means is I head up a service in our district council, which is dedicated to the strategic delivery of projects that are considered to be critical to our council and high priority for our council. And that might be because it generates a level of income that's really important. It might generate a cost saving or a cost avoidance to the council, which is really important, or delivers a project that identifies and finds a solution to a very specific need that the council needs to address at that particular time. It carries a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure delivering projects. Have to be delivered on time, on budget, and there's always that challenge that comes with projects. But one of the reasons why I love project management so much is that it's one of the few professions where you really get to see the hard work that you put into something at the end of it when that project's completed, and taking something from either a blank canvas or something that's not working properly or could be improved, delivering a project and then seeing the end product at the end of it. You get to see all of your hard work come to fruition. And I've always really enjoyed that about project management.
With your projects then, are they generally, when you've completed them, even though they will carry on going and going on into the future, you then pass them on to a different team then, rather than an ongoing, like holding people's hands throughout?
Yes, exactly that. So once a project comes to closure, we'd hand that back to the relevant service area to then run the day-to-day running of that project and manage that moving forward. And that means for me it's really interesting because when I deliver a project, I then move on to another one, then another one, and I go across all these different service areas delivering projects for them, and get that real insight across the whole entire council of what our council are doing, what our officers are doing, and get that real sort of broader understanding of how local government works.
Yes, must be really interesting, especially different projects, rather than the same job over and over again, the same role, but completely different projects that will look completely different depending on what's going on. But you obviously brought your team down. The guys at home won't know, but we had our big Tesco's collection before.
Well, you should know. It's been online.
In November, yeah. But Mark brought his team down, or a few people from his team, to come and help us.
There was like an army of them.
They were like an army. They were like an army of ants. They sorted so quickly. I couldn't keep up. Me and Rich was knackered. He came in the next week and said, I couldn't keep up with that lot. So your team were amazing.
Brilliant. That's good to hear.
But yeah, I thought I'd ask you why you thought it was important for you guys to come down and volunteer at the food bank, because some people value the work of it, some people don't really know what's going on in the background in their community. But why did you think it was, and your team agreed to come along and give us a hand?
It was really important for a whole number of reasons. But before I dive into that, we felt the same. We come out of there absolutely exhausted.
Oh, good.
It really did. So I have a team of 6 people in our sort of our new corporate projects team, and they are a brilliant team. And sometimes feels like there's triple the amount of people that we actually have because they all work so hard and they're so dedicated to what they do. And first of all, obviously, thank you for being great hosts. We really enjoyed it.
So we booked you in for next year already.
Yeah. So it was a sort of good physical exercise, but really good kind of brain training as well, if I could put it that way, because you're constantly looking at all these different products, looking at the dates, realising and figuring out what basket they need to go in. And so there's sort of 2 elements that we weren't necessarily expecting. But for me, what was really, really important is that my team deliver projects that quite often have an element of social value or social impact when they're delivered. So I felt it was really, really important for them to come and listen to a local service provider. That's really, really important to get an understanding about why the projects that we deliver are so important to our district and why they are so needed and why we're under pressure to deliver them quite quickly, because sometimes that can be hard to understand. But when you actually come talk to community groups, which is obviously massively important, and see it from the sort of the boots on the ground point of view, it changes your perspective a lot, and you get to really understand some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment and build those partnerships with local organisations as well. So that was really, really important. And just thinking about that from a more broader sense, it's actually something that we're looking at in a bit more detail at the council, ensuring that officers can have a little bit of time here and there to go out and spend time volunteering within our community to get that understanding, have that presence in our community as well, which is really important.
That's good.
And just kind of build those relationships and open the door for conversation. So off the back of us coming to volunteering, that's opened the door for this conversation that we're having at the moment. And I think collaborative working is so massively important across local government, with healthcare sector, and also with charities and community groups. And I've seen it from the other side as well, in terms of being in sort of community groups. and wanting to engage with the local authorities and the local councils, but sometimes came up against barriers, and it felt that way. This is obviously going back a long time, and I don't think that's anyone's fault.
It's not purposeful, is it? It's just when you've got so many things to do,
Yep.
it's just another thing that needs to be done.
And at the moment, we sort of pride ourselves on wanting to build those relationships and partnerships because we see and understand the value and the impact of them as well. Yeah. And I think probably COVID changed a lot of that, to be honest. During the sort of really difficult times we had during the COVID pandemic, we were obviously had the resources there and really needed to get help and support out to people, but relied on these community groups like yourself to be the boots on the ground to help us deliver those resources to local people. And that collaborative working approach really sort of came to fruition a lot during COVID. And off the back of that, we've seen the value in collaborative working, which is so massively important.
Yeah, well, some good came of it then.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So can you share a few of your, like, over the last few years, I know you might not have been heading it up for all that time, but the projects that have been done over the last, few years, just sort of touch a few details on each of them, because I want to go into one of them into more detail next. Yeah. But have you got just an idea at home, because just projects doesn't mean anything to people. So
the projects that I've been involved, I've been in local government for 5 years now. The projects that I've been involved in really sort of differ in terms of their size, their scope, and the areas that we're delivering them as well. And it's ranged from things like creating community spaces and pocket parks in our town centres, to delivering some really sort of key and important projects around a growing need and demand for temporary accommodation, which you've probably seen in sort of national headlines recently. We've been involved in a lot of projects over the last couple of years looking to address that need, which is becoming quite an urgent need, and is also having a big effect on councils up and down the country at the moment. We've seen some quite large authorities in Birmingham and Nottingham that are really struggling financially because our resources are quite limited at the moment. The funding isn't quite there where we need it to be. And we have this huge growing demand to find temporary accommodation for people and households that have come into homelessness.
Yeah. Did you say pocket park?
Pocket parks, yeah.
Never heard
that. I'm glad you said
that,
because I was going to say, I don't know what a pocket park is.
Yeah, so essentially looking at some of our market towns, and if there's an area, a pocket of land somewhere that's underdeveloped or not being used, and turning that into a community space. So an example of that is the Ellen Fen Garden, it's called, in Dereham, right in the middle of the town centre in a busy shopping precinct. And there was an area of sort of derelict land in the middle there that we developed and turned into a community garden, a community space, to bring the community together a little bit more, to increase the footfall in the shopping precinct, and to create a space where the community can have events and all kinds of different activities and things all going on all the time to increase the footfall in the town centre. And also for people that don't have a garden space to come and have that central location where they can come and talk to each other and just sort of have that community space.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because like that sort of space, I think for a lot of people wouldn't value it. But when it's not there, then they would really like. You haven't got that, then you really like it. Like people during COVID who were locked in who didn't have gardens, to be able to go to the park and stuff during them times were nice. But I think them sort of communal spaces and just open spaces are so important for the human soul as well.
Exactly, yeah.
But what I'd like to talk about really is the project at Elm Road in Thetford and what that was. If you can paint the picture of what that was about, because I think that sort of feeds into what we do the best. And might have an impact down the road as well. So
there's a really significant project that we delivered for the council, and it addresses a real sort of pressing need at the moment around temporary accommodation. We've seen a huge increase in households becoming homeless over the last couple of years, and obviously we have a statutory obligation to find housing for everyone that's in our district, that's living in our district. So obviously, ordinarily, during these sort of times when people do present as homeless, and we have to find a short-term interim solution, and that's normally overnight paid accommodation somewhere. So that might be in a B&B or a local hotel, if a local hotel can be sourced. So historically, people that present themselves as homeless, obviously we would have to find a location for them to stay on a temporary basis, while our housing team finds a longer-term solution. And our housing team obviously work incredibly hard under really difficult circumstances and under huge amount of pressure at the moment. And obviously we have a statutory obligation to provide housing. Off the back of the Homelessness Reduction Act, which is legislation that came out in 2017, we've obviously worked really hard to try and eradicate homelessness in our district. unfortunately, off the back of COVID and with the cost of living crisis, the need and the demand has just continued to almost sort of skyrocket to record levels at the moment. And that presents a real challenge for us as a council because, one, we have to find suitable accommodation without sending people miles away to a B&B when they might live in Thetford, their children might go to school in Thetford, or their support network is here in Thetford, for example. So rather than sending them away to a hotel in Norwich, we have to try and find a more local solution. But if the housing market doesn't allow that, on a short-term basis, we have to try and find a solution for that. And off the back of the Homelessness Reduction Act in 2017, luckily our council were really on the front foot with that and looked almost straight away to find some properties across our district that could potentially be converted and reused to facilitate a temporary accommodation scheme to provide temporary and emergency housing. And we looked at a number of different properties, former school buildings, former hotels. We discovered the property at Elm Road in Thetford, which is a former primary school building owned by the county council at the time. And that site had been empty for around about 10 years. And obviously just sat there, and there was a lot of concern from local residents around things like vandalism and antisocial behaviour. So we spotted an opportunity there to acquire that property from the county council, redevelop it and give it a new lease of life as a temporary accommodation scheme to provide short-term emergency housing for people. And by remodelling that former school building and bringing it back to life, we've managed to create 17 units for accommodation. And that short-term accommodation whilst our housing team find a longer-term solution. What that does is it gives us more control over the housing options in terms of that emergency need by having something that's quite sort of central in the right location for people that live in Thetford, where there's quite high need and demand for temporary accommodation because it's one of our largest market towns. And also ensures that we can provide somewhere that's safe, that's suitable, that's hygienic, that's local, close to people's support network, close to where their children might go to school. And has become a really, really important project. Of course, it's not the solution, the long-term solution to homelessness and temporary accommodation, but at least in the short term gives us the comfort that we can provide somewhere safe and secure. And also there's an element of cost avoidance because housing 17 households diverts them from going to bed and breakfast facilities, which is obviously very costly to the council.
Yeah, I suppose it's a big upfront cost, isn't it?
Yes,
people
it is,
might resist, but it is a long-term,
absolutely,
much more efficient way of spending.
Yep. And I think the important thing to highlight was obviously that the cost avoidance to the council just through Elm Road itself is a six-figure sum each year. So very, very quickly that project pays for itself, and in the long term is avoiding us spending lots more on temporary accommodation in terms of hotels and bed and breakfast facilities.
They're like energy-saving light bulbs. That's what it is.
Those 17 units then, they all differ in size?
They do, yep.
Okay.
Yep. So they can accommodate individuals, couples, and there's free self-contained flats as well for larger families. And that's, again, really, really important because trying to put a family in a B&B, it might be, if they're a large family, they'd be across 2 or 3 different rooms, and it's just not practical, not suitable.
I think it's really, really good. We've started working with Your Own Place. I don't know if you've heard of Your Own Place. They operate out of Norwich mainly, but they've started coming out this way. Yeah, so more and more people on that trajectory down towards homelessness and the threat of that as well. So having that ready to go with, like you said, seeing into the future a bit and seeing what was coming down the pike.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. Just quickly, sorry, I'm just interested in this. You said about it being short term. Yeah. So when you say short term, what's the amount of time? Like, what's the shortest and what's the longest that people? It
entirely depends on the individual circumstances.
Okay.
So if it's a large family, we'd probably expect them to be there a little bit longer whilst that right solution is found.
Okay.
In the long term, on average, it's around about 2 months.
Okay.
It can be shorter than that if somewhere comes up quite quickly for someone that's single, perhaps. Right. But it might be longer if it's a larger family as well.
Yeah, because there's less options to move them onto, isn't there? The bigger the family as well. Yeah. So it's good that there's flexibility with that. We've been talking a lot about, especially even this week, about participation in the food bank, and basically purposely including those with lived experience, receiving food bank parcels and being in food poverty in either recently or in the past, with our decision-making process about how we not just run the food bank, but what we do going forward and how we can, impact in the community further upstream and getting lived experience for you, so that what we deem participation work within Trust or Trust, I think generally in the charity sector it's called that as well. But I read on one of your blogs, I think, about About the council involving the community in then decision making, and it's often with planning, that's part of the process as well. But like, we're only just starting to sort of step into trying to do that in a real way rather than a box ticking way. Yeah. And so like, I was like, if I can steal ways of doing it, from you guys. But how successful that's been, and how does the council involve the community in deciding what projects you do, particularly like with Elm Road, how did you go about gleaning that data from the community and involving them in the decision-making process? And, any strategies that have been successful in doing that? Because, we want to steal them.
I think Elm Road is a really good example of that exact process, to be honest. We obviously had to bear in mind the location of that property when we acquired it from the county council. It's right in the middle of a really busy housing estate. So they had a lot of interest and to a certain degree concern from local residents as well as to what's going in there, what it's going to be like, how it's going to be managed. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we want to get that point across of the reason why it's really, really important, but also relay and reassure people in terms of the way it's going to be managed and the clientele that are going to be going into those units that I mentioned there. So we've done that in a number of ways, actually. So I think the important thing was taking the community, particularly the local residents in that area, along the journey with us. Yeah. So at the very, very beginning, we talked to the local community and done a Q&A session at Fulmerston Church, just around the corner, and said, look, this is what we intend to do. This is the reason behind it, the reason why. And just to sit and listen to some of the comments and feedback that we got and take that into consideration when it comes to making decisions on that site as well. And that might be everything from the way that the construction traffic was managed in terms of the noise and the hours of operation whilst the project was being delivered, but then also thinking about things like security on the site as well and management of tenants that live there. And initially we looked at having a management provider on site between sort of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. But following the conversations we have with the local community, one of the concerns was, okay, what happens at night time if suddenly people start having a party or playing loud music and there's antisocial behaviour? And we listened to that, and off the back of that decided to actually have a management presence there 24/7. So the site is managed by Access Community Trust, who are a third sector organisation that specifically work with clients in terms of housing. So they're there 24/7. The site is there. There's a concierge space there in sort of reception area. And that's been really, really important just to sort of make sure that everyone that's there is following the rules. It's well managed. It's well maintained. The place is immaculate. So I often go back there 2 years it's been open and it's still immaculate. It's kept in really, really good condition. They've got really good relationships with the local community and the neighbours and the Burnham Grove next door as well. And it's really, really, really positive, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, and it's probably true. You probably can't please everyone on that journey, but you're at least trying to do the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe you haven't. Maybe it's not something that you would do, but like in terms of, did you have to engage, or would you choose to engage with people with the sort of the lived experience of people who are who don't have housing as well in that decision making process, rather than the community of just where the project's
we did
going?
Absolutely, and. Throughout the sort of life cycle of the project, we went and actually visited other temporary accommodation schemes across the whole district. We actually went and spent time with Peterborough Council and with an organisation called Cross Keys Homes, who are very similar to Access Community Trust. And we went and visited some of their temporary accommodation schemes and talked to the residents that live there about their experience. Everything from their journey in terms of when they first arrive and how they're greeted on site to things like having a pet policy. We didn't even think of that to begin with. Yeah. But when we spoke to a resident there who said, if I had the choice between living on the streets with my dog or living in here on my own, I'd pick the streets every single time.
We've had that multiple times just last year who just can't let go of it. And I understand what, I love animals and dogs. She'd rather get a house. She hates animals.
No, I don't hate animals. That's not true. I just don't want them in my house.
Part of the family, and from a mental health point of view as well, particularly if you're on your own, that separation from your pet can be detrimental. So we listened to that and we incorporated a pet policy to allow people to bring their pets into site. Obviously there's certain sort of parameters within that as well to ensure safety. But that was really, really important. So we listened to the journey, part of the service provided there in terms of that concierge service is a light touch level of support as well. So it's not intense sort of supported accommodation as such, but it does provide an element of just having someone there to have a conversation with, to welcome you on site. There's a lot of value in terms of peer support as well. Again, talking to residents that have been there and lived it, they talked about the importance of having a communal space within a scheme that allows people to come and sit and have meals together, to watch TV together. And we listen to that and incorporate that into the design of Elm House as well. We also listen to things like the design of the rooms, making sure that they are, the windows are in there, they're quite large, they allow a lot of light in. Again, that's really important from a mental health point of view, that you're not shut in a dark room. So yeah, the whole way through the process, we listen to people that have been through the experience, we listen to people within the local community and incorporated their views into the decision-making process. And I think that's one of the reasons why the project's been a massive success.
Yeah, because it could be so easy, can't it, when you're in a position of making decisions that, especially if you're competent, is you just make them decisions because you know best, where if you haven't lived that out, you just don't know what's important in them scenarios, do you? So I think it's brilliant that the council have done that. It's really, and your team. Yeah. It's great. So have you got any more like upcoming projects that may be secret?
I'm not going to tell us.
That we can reveal. That you're excited about that are maybe in the pipeline, or ones that are, further down into the future that you would like to do, but aren't happening yet. Anything that's...
I think all the projects we deliver are really exciting because, again, you see the value in what you do and you see the impact of some of the projects you deliver as well, particularly if they're ones that have a social impact or a social value to them. And for me, delivering those kind of projects has given me a real sense of purpose in my career and in my life. And I don't look at anything and say, I really want to do this, I really want to do that. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. Perhaps on an even bigger scale, maybe in terms of regeneration within towns and looking at more sort of longer term solutions for this temporary accommodation crisis that we're in at the moment. So they're the kind of things that really excite me because you get that sense of purpose in terms of what you're doing. Elm House is quite a difficult one, actually, because on one hand, it's been an incredible project and it's something that's gained a lot of national attention, actually, from lots of other councils that are interested in how we done it and repurposing a public-owned asset has been a really sort of flagship project for us to do, and has got other councils thinking creatively. Actually, if we've got an old building here that might be a school or an old hotel in our district, we could actually reinvest in that and transform it as opposed to building a new one, which is obviously going to be more expensive to do that. We've also had a visit from Princess Anne as well. So we've had a royal visit at Elm House as well. So that's, again, fills you with a lot of pride, that kind of thing. But at the same time, kind of is something that you don't really feel like celebrating because of the fact that it's such a sort of almost really upsetting need. And it's upsetting that we have the sort of need to create something like that. It's probably similar to you guys definitely. In terms of comparison. What you guys do and what your volunteers do is incredible, and you see the value in what you do every single day and how many people it helps. At the same time, we don't really feel like celebrating it. Because ultimately you want to get rid of the use of food banks in the same way we as a district council, of course, want to get rid of the need and requirement for temporary accommodation because we want to have long-term solutions in place. So it's a difficult one because you see your hard work come to fruition and you want to celebrate your successes, but at the same time, it's really difficult to do that and you don't feel the need to do that. So it's challenging.
So what I'm getting from that answer, he's not going to reveal any secret projects that are coming up.
Nothing.
I have to be a little bit careful.
No, I understand.
There's obviously what I obviously can talk about is, again, temporary accommodation. Obviously, it's such a significant issue at the moment. You've probably seen a lot of the national press coverage around it. So we are looking at the next phases of Elm House and how we can build on from that. We recently completed a phase 2 of Elm House. So on the site that we acquired from the county council, there was obviously a lot of land and parking spaces around the site and around the school building. And we took a pocket of the land that was there, part of the site. We worked with Breckland Housing to build 5 new units specifically for rough sleepers. So this is a different type of housing need. It's slightly more longer term as opposed to 2 months. It could be anything up to sort of a couple of years, but addresses a real specific need of people that rough sleep in. And that's quite hidden issue in terms of Thetford and local areas, and a lot of it's hidden away in forestry, actually. People camp in tents.
It's only if you're an organisation like us, you know
exactly,
people and they come to us, and if you don't, you wouldn't see them.
So last year we opened 5 new units specifically for rough sleepers, and obviously moved people straight off the streets into those units, and they get a bit more sort of hands-on support in terms of help setting up a bank account, claiming benefits and giving access to benefits, and with a long-term goal of getting them back into the job market and reintegrating them back into society. So that's almost a phase 2 of Elm House. We're also looking at other solutions as well, just so we're not looking at just one particular area. We're looking all around the district, because people obviously could be made homeless anywhere that they live in the district. So we're looking at purchasing houses for temporary accommodation use as well, directly off the housing market to put them into a positive use. Just looking at more and more projects based around temporary accommodation, because it's such a growing concern for local councils.
You mentioned there about like the long-term solutions, which, you know, we've talked about on the podcast a little with the long-term solutions for Foodbank, and one of which I believe is housing and building more houses. So like, obviously you run out of Dereham, do you?
Our main offices are in Dereham. Yeah, we have offices in Thetford as well.
So your office is quite close to the planning office as well. Like, that might do you ever put pressure on them to like go and clear some more planning to build some more houses to alleviate some of our problems?
Well, it's such a massive challenge.
Yeah, I know.
I think there's a whole number of factors. You touched upon a couple there, but it is such a complex challenge, and there's so many layers to it as well. When you look at central government, the different layers of local government, it is such a complex challenge. And my sort of knowledge and understanding of central government politics and processes and policy writing isn't perhaps strong enough to sort of really articulate what the core issues are and how to solve those core issues. But I do think at a more local level, certainly in terms of local authorities, there's probably a lot of targeted integrations that we can look at together. And that might be looking at things like physical health, mental health, working with schools, looking at free school meals and that kind of thing as well, working with supermarkets to ensure that no food goes to waste. There's lots of targeted interventions that we can work on, but the key to that, as I mentioned earlier, is that collaborative working and unlocking that and being willing to work together at all levels of local government. And also relying upon organisations such as yourselves as well that are going to play a really big part in that in the future moving forward. And I think as a council, we absolutely recognise that and really sort of willing to continue to open the doors for conversation and build on those relationships.
On that then, what role do you think that councils should have, either local or district or county, or even central government, should play in addressing food poverty? And like we've been talking to loads of people about this, like you're saying, just the housing monster is so layered. When you zoom out even further to food provision, it's so massive, like all the problems that feed into it. But what do you think the local and district and county council's role is in addressing food poverty directly? Because, I suppose I've been wrestling with it personally for years, because, decades ago, it was just, well, that's the charity sector. That's what we do. Yeah. There's a need and we meet it. And so, but there's more and more, school of thought of, really it's a council or a government problem, and the policies aren't in place to address them issues. So where do you, personally, where do you see them lines being drawn? Because I think it's so grey. And
it is. And again, it's really complex, and there's so many layers to it, and there's so many different moving parts and elements. There's no sort of one answer to give there. I think, again, on that broader sense, at the central government level, it's not just looking at housing, it's looking at all kinds of different things, looking at the cost of living crisis that we're in at the moment, looking at economic growth, looking at prosperity, looking at support in terms of benefits and support packages that we can filter down to the people that really need it. There's lots of different layers to it. It's really, really complex. And as I said earlier, my knowledge of central government isn't strong enough to really articulate it and talk about the root issues. And even if it was, it's probably not my place to say in terms of being a local government officer. I have to be obviously a little bit careful and obviously remain politically neutral in that sense. But also at that local level, I think at every level that you look at, we all have a massive responsibility, and it's a collective responsibility, even if it's not looking at it from a statutory point of view. From a moral point of view, we all have an obligation to play a part in that. And I think you scratch beneath the surface, although it's not obvious at times, we're still deeply rooted in terms of our values as a society to help each other and help people that are in need. And sometimes, as I said, that's not always obvious in this day and age, but it is there, and there's a moral obligation for everyone to play a part in finding the solutions in the long term. Yeah,
no, I agree.
Right, so I think that leaves me with the last question then, which is there anything, Mark, that you think that we should be discussing, or and when I say we, I mean all of us, but or doing at the food bank and in the council and in the community that would help address food poverty and lead us closer to a UK without the need for food banks? So, sorry,
That's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question.
It's really open.
Yeah.
It's like, what,
It is, yeah.
What do you think?
what are we talking about that what are we not talking about that we should be talking
Well,
about?
I think the important thing is continue doing what you're doing, having conversations like here on this podcast. And obviously I've watched some of your previous episodes with some really important guests that you've had on here, all sort of layers of local government and charities and community groups. Keep having those conversations, keep shining a light on some of the challenges we've got at the moment. Be willing to work with us in terms of local government, and obviously we're willing to work with all sort of sectors, whether that's our colleagues in terms of healthcare, whether that's organisations that specifically focus on mental health, and whether that's organisations such as yourselves that are looking to address a specific need around food poverty. Just keep doing what you're doing, I guess. And I think it's an interesting one around that sort of long-term vision that the Trussell Trust have with regards to ending food poverty and eradicating food banks. It's a really big and broad challenge, I think. And I've listened to Emma Reevy talk a number of times on different podcasts and presentations that she's done. And I think that absolutely has to be the long-term goal. But I also look at it with my project manager's hat on to a certain degree and think that's such a long-term vision. Getting there is not going to be easy. And I think if you were to break that down into smaller, more measurable stages, there's probably a lot of value in that, because you're going to see the progress. Whereas obviously if you're just working towards a goal without that, you might not see or understand the progress that you're making and get that sense of forward motion. But also you kind of get to see the journey a bit more and get to sort of see where you're at, and just breaking that down into smaller, more measurable stages over a set amount of time and putting a bit of a time scale on it as well. I think would be really, really beneficial, and just thinking about, okay, how do we get from A to B? Then how do we get from B to C? And just breaking it down. And that's me with my project manager's hat on.
Yeah.
And that's the way we manage projects. Simple as that. Break it down into smaller stages, step by step. And those small steps obviously will lead to a much, much bigger objective.
Yeah, I think that is what Trussell are doing from a central point of view. You know, they have a few things that they're really pushing as their main agenda. Yeah. And once that's done, it will move on to the next thing. But that's the same in our food bank as well. It's just like we keep picking up these new projects, so we just start this next new thing that could have a little impact, and taking baby steps towards, making a changeover. Probably will take decades.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's all right though. We're in it for the long haul. Aren't we? So anyway, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing everything that you have today. And we are back in 2 weeks' time with a very special podcast with some of our Thetford food bank volunteers. You don't want to miss it.
I'm looking forward to that one.
I know, I'm not. No, don't really. So we'll see you then. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Hublife Podcast, then why not check out another one over here, or try something a little different over there.